Today I'm making butterflies glow with embossing and ink blending. Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. I'm here on the Altenew YouTube channel on the first and third Saturday of the month. So if you enjoy my videos, I'd love for you to subscribe. So let's get started. I'm using the beautiful Flutter Bloom set today. There is a stamp set, coordinating dies, a stencil and an embossing folder. I'm just using the stamp and dies today, and I absolutely love this butterfly here in the corner. I'd used a lot of the florals for my release cards, but I really wanted to use that butterfly, so I'm going to be using it today. I've taken a piece of vellum translucent paper and I'm placing this in the stamp wheel so that I can stamp my butterfly on top. So just popping that down in the corner there, it's going to stick to the sticky mat, and then I can bring in the butterfly. I just think it's absolutely beautiful. There are coordinating stencils if you wanted to colour it in, and I'm going to show a little peek of that at the end of the video. But for now, I'm placing it down onto the vellum. I can then bring it in the top flip plate of the stamp wheel, pop that down and pick up that stamp. I can then flip it over and I can ink up the image using embossing ink. This is a clear sticky ink so that when I add the embossing powder on top, it's going to stick to it. So I'm just inking up that image really well. It is quite detailed, so just making sure I cover all of the areas. And then I forgot to prep my vellum, so I'm just bringing in an anti-static powder tool, and then I'm going to remove the excess powder with a brush. This helps to prevent any static cling so that hopefully the embossing powder will only stick to the ink. I can then flip over that top flip plate, pop that in place and then stamp the image down onto the vellum. So just lightly pressing that down, and then I can flip up the plate, and then I've got my butterfly stamped onto the vellum. I can then apply some pure white crisp embossing powder, and I do like to do this a few times, tap off the excess just to make sure that I get really nice coverage of that powder. I'm then going to heat set it using my heat tool. If you've never embossed on vellum before, do be careful because it does warp quite easily. It does heat up very quickly. So as you can see here, I'm kind of going in sections, moving the heat gun away so that I'm not going to accidentally overheat that vellum. Also, I don't want to overheat the powder, but the vellum will warp if it has too much heat on it. So I'm now just kind of flicking it in the air to cool it down. Vellum does cool down a lot quicker than cardstock, and then I can remove any excess powder with a cloth. And then I had just a couple of little specks of embossing powder where I didn't want it, so I'm just using a craft knife there just to carefully remove that embossing, and if I just use the very tip of that knife, it comes off quite easily. I'm then taking the coordinating die from the Flutter Bloom die set. I can place that over the top of the image and then hold it down with some low tack tape. When I'm doing any die cutting with vellum, I do like to die cut on top of a scrap piece of paper. This just helps to not only get a clean cut with the vellum, but also make sure that I don't get any marks on the back of the vellum from the cutting plates. So I've got my lovely butterfly there. Vellum does warp quite easily just with kind of moisture of your hands. So what I'm going to do is just place something heavy over the top while I work on the rest of the card. For the background, I want to have my butterfly on a tag. So I've cut one of the larger tags from the Terrific Tags die set from Classic Crest £110 Solar White cardstock. I do want my tag to be a little bit shorter in height, so I'm bringing back the die and I'm going to place it on top and kind of figure out here how short I want that tag to be. So I'm bringing it in the stamp set to make sure that I've got enough space around the butterfly, but that there's not too much. So just lifting that up a little bit, making sure that that's in place, and then I can hold that down with some low tack tape. And when I run this through my die cutting machine, it's going to cut the tag to be shorter. I could just cut it down with a guillotine or a paper trimmer, but I really love how dies just kind of round the edges a little bit, and I think it finishes it off nicely. And I'm not having to do any partial die cutting or anything, because nothing's sort of inside of that shape of that die that's going to cut again. I've placed that down on a sticky mat, and I'm going to add some ink blending on top with the new Northern Shore Fresh Dye Ink collection. So I've got the little cubes here. I absolutely love these colours. I'm glad that they've brought them out in the Fresh Dye Ink collection now. Such pretty blue shades. I'm not using the lightest shade today because it's going to get completely covered up otherwise, but I am using the next lightest, although to be honest a lot of this will get covered up as well. This is the Icy Water, and I'm using a small blending brush, and I'm just going to go over the entire tag with this colour. I'm not too concerned if it's splotchy or anything like that, because like I say, this colour is pretty much going to get completely covered up, apart from just right in the very centre. I do like to dab off the excess ink from the brush. This does generally give me a smoother blend, but halfway through this I realised that it's going to get covered up, so I wasn't too concerned. I'm now taking the second darkest shade, which is Winter Lake, and I'm using the same blending brush, and I'm just trying to sort of focus this colour around the outside edges and leave kind of like a lighter area in the center, which is going to help to kind of make it look a little bit like the butterflies glowing sort of from behind. I'm then taking this same color, but I'm using a mini blending brush this time and going around the kind of very outer edges, I suppose, here. And not only is this going to just be darker because I'm adding another layer of ink, but because I'm using the mini blending brush, the bristles are a lot denser, so it just automatically adds a darker saturation of colour on top. So I'm just going around the edges here, and you can see that as I add this darker colour, that sort of lighter glow in the middle just kind of gets even brighter. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the darkest shade. I am bringing in the small blending brush here. I thought that it might blend it out a little bit more. It did absolutely nothing whatsoever, but in my head I thought that it did something. So now I can go in with the darkest shade, which is the Arctic Mountain, and again just focus this colour very much on the outside edges. I would often add maybe like a black on top, but I thought that this was dark enough that I didn't need the black as well. So just going around those outside edges there, and you can see that I've got a really nice sort of highlight in the centre. I do want to add a little bit of splatter on top, so I'm adding a bit of water here onto a non-stick craft sheet, just adding 2 pools of water there. And then I can bring in the Artist Squash. This is the titanium white to start with. And I can just add a small amount of that onto the craft sheet. These bottles, or tubes I should say, are going to last me absolutely years because I only use a tiny bit at a time, but I don't want to waste too much of it, even though I've got loads. I can then just do the exact same thing with the carbon black. I'm then taking a watercolour brush. This is a really tiny brush. This is a size 2, and for the black I'm actually using a size 1 because I don't want to have these splatters too big. I want them to be quite small, kind of look a little bit like sparkle in the air, sort of around the butterfly, and again that's just going to help it glow as well. So just tapping that brush to splatter on the paint onto the tag, and I'm focusing most of the splatters sort of around the outside edges. Not only will these show up the most because they are on the darker areas, but because the butterfly is going to be in the centre, most of the centre splatters are going to be covered up anyway. And then I can do the same thing for the black, and again focus these mainly towards the outside edges where it's darker, but I thought it was quite nice having the combination of the black and the white. And then I am going to set that aside to dry. I'm just going to try and carefully lift this up here for you to see it a little bit better, trying not to get my fingers in that paint. So I think that looks really pretty. Once that's dry, the inks do kind of fade a little bit and do blend out a little bit more as well. I've then got the Silky Lilac metallic thread, and I folded that in half, and now I'm folding it in half again. I want to do a double bow, Because this thread is quite thin, I think that it gives a really nice impact if you use it in kind of like a double bow rather than a single bow. So I'm just threading that through and securing that at the front. I can then take the pieces and then tie those into a bow. So I've got 2 strands on either side. And this thread is a little bit on the slippery side, so I'm just taking my time here to tie that bow. And it does get a little bit fiddly because of all of the strands of thread, but like I say, I think it looks really pretty, and I think it makes a bigger impact with that double bow. So just trying to get the bow how I want it to be, and then I can cut off the tails using some scissors. And when I'm doing a double bow, I do often like to cut the tails sort of slightly different on each one, so one being slightly shorter and one being slightly longer. I'm then adding some instant dimension foam tape onto the back of the tag, so just cutting strips of that and popping that on the back, and then I can remove the backings off of that foam tape. I'm then adhering it down onto an A2 size white card base, so that's a finished size of 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. So just hovering that in place, and then I can press that down. I have then heat embossed a sentiment from the Flutter Bloom stamp set. Just did the exact same thing like I did with the butterfly, but onto black cardstock instead, and cut that down into a strip. I can then add some foam tape onto the back of that, and then using the grid lines on my mat, I'm going to try and line up this sentiment as straight as possible on the top of the butterfly. So I'm trying to sort of line the butterfly up with the grid lines, and then I can line the sentiment up with the grid lines as well. And now I've got a place to add adhesive on the back so that it's not going to show through the vellum. I'm using glue tape here, and I'm just adding as much as possible on that kind of strip there behind where the sentiment is. In hindsight, I wish that I had just cut a piece of double-sided tape down, but I didn't think of that at the time, so I might try and go back and remove the butterfly really carefully and add some double-sided tape behind there. I think that that would hold a little bit more, hold a little bit better, I should say. But as I am doing it at the moment, I'm just using a T-square ruler to try and line that up straight. And then I'm going in with my tweezers and I'm kind of poking them behind where the sentiment strip is to try and press that glue down as best as possible. And then I didn't completely get a really lovely impression with the embossing powder for the sentiment. So I'm going in with a white gel pen just to cover any gaps that I might have. And then I'm just going to lift up the wings of the butterfly. I think it just looks really nice, just having it a little bit more dimensional. And so that is the card finished for today. I really love how that butterfly kind of glows from behind. I think it's very pretty. But I did want to just share with you my thought process on the card. I had originally planned on stamping the butterfly and then ink blending it with the same colours of ink that I used for the background with the stencils, and I do really like how it would look like this, but I felt like the butterfly just didn't glow enough, and I do really like how it glows on the vellum. But I think I'm going to do the card on the right hand side with the dark background and the white tag, and I think that that pops just a little bit more, so I thought I would just share that with you as well. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.